As a caregiver, safety is one of your highest priorities. The safety of the persons you're caring for, your safety, and the safety of your coworkers. There are many types of emergencies you might encounter, including fires, natural disasters such as earthquakes or hurricanes, and even bomb threats or workplace violence. What's important is that you are prepared to appropriately respond to the emergency and protect the persons that you're caring for. During this video, we will discuss basic emergency procedures, fire prevention, using a fire extinguisher, evacuations, as well as responding to medical emergencies. It's important that you know your policies and procedures, and that you follow the procedures specific to the type of emergency you've encountered.
Well, we have a definite policy and procedure on our training. New employees are trained upon orientation. That's included before they ever start actually working on the premises. They go through our orientation.
Let's begin by discussing some basic emergency procedures. First, it's important that you know the chain of command within your workplace. Who is in charge? Who takes responsibility during an emergency? As well as who takes responsibility should your typical supervisor or administrator not be in the building. Where is your central reporting location? This includes a reporting location within the building during an emergency, as well as having a predetermined meeting point during an evacuation outside the building and away from danger zones. What are the responsibilities of each individual in your workplace? Who stays with your residents? Who is responsible for transporting resident records, medications, or food? Who is responsible for communicating with the fire department once they arrive on site?
We cover their areas that they're responsible for. We have somebody that is a team leader, so to speak. We let the receptionists and security people know that they are to stay at their stations so that they can direct phone calls that come in, or the fire department if they come, that type of thing.
It's also important to know if you are to evacuate or stay in place during an emergency. Now, of course, the answer to that question will vary based on the type of emergency you've encountered, but it's also dependent on your fire codes and how your building was constructed. For example, many larger buildings with appropriate fire doors and sprinklers don't necessarily evacuate during all fires. Clarify this with your supervisor, your local fire department, and your state regulations.
There are enough of us that in the event of an emergency, and if we had to remove residents, we would get it done.
It's also important to know your communication procedures. Following an emergency, you will need to communicate with a variety of individuals, including the family members of the persons you're caring for, possibly the media, as well as state and local licensing and regulatory bodies. Now let's talk about some basic steps you will take when responding to an actual emergency. Your most important first step is to report it. This includes reporting it internally through the use of walkie-talkies or fire alarms, and reporting it externally, such as calling 911. Do not hesitate to call 911 during an emergency. That old rule of thumb, when in doubt, call 911, always applies. Secondly, you want to remove people from the area of immediate danger. For example, if there's a fire in a resident's room, you will want to quickly remove the resident and any other coworkers from that room. Third, you will want to address any immediate safety needs that you can handle. For example, a small fire in a trash can, you will want to grab a fire extinguisher and try to extinguish the fire. Keep in mind that while doing that, you don't want to put yourself in danger. If it is unsafe for you to respond, follow your evacuation procedures and coordinate with emergency medical personnel once they arrive. Follow your chain of command. Report to your appropriate supervisor, or if you are the person in charge, take charge of the situation and be sure to delegate duties and supervise your staff appropriately. Of course, you'll want to evacuate the building if needed. Again, safety is our highest priority, so if you're unsure, put your evacuation procedures into motion. Finally, you will need to do follow-up reporting. After the emergency, after everyone is safe and you've been able to return to the building, or if you've had to relocate to an evacuation center, you'll want to do your follow-up reporting with licensing, families, and other appropriate parties. While there are many types of emergencies you might encounter, fires, of course, pose one of the greatest dangers to your community. Follow these basic steps for good fire prevention within your workplace. Be sure that you or your residents smoke only in designated areas. Store flammables or combustibles in appropriate areas. Use electrical equipment only as intended. For example, do not use octopus plugs to increase the capacity of an electrical outlet, as that is a very serious fire danger. Never use an extension cord as permanent wiring. Know how to use your fire extinguisher or other fire suppression systems. Regularly conduct fire drills and test your alarm systems as well. It is important that everyone knows how to safely use a fire extinguisher. Remember, life safety is your priority. This means that if your life is endangered by attempting to extinguish a fire, don't do it. Make sure you or others are not put in a dangerous situation, and make sure that you can always exit the building if the fire gets out of hand.
Quite often we'll have someone from our alarm company come out and actually do a demonstration on how to properly use a fire extinguisher.
You need to understand how to use a fire extinguisher and what types of fires the different extinguishers can be used for. There are several classes of fire extinguishers, including Class A, which is for wood and paper fires. Class A extinguishers should never be used on electrical fires because they are liquid-based. Class B extinguishers can be used on flammable liquid fires. Class C extinguishers are used on electrical fires. And Class D extinguishers are used for burning metal fires. Normally, you won't see 4 different types of extinguishers in your workplace. Rather, you will have an extinguisher that is classified as an A, B, C type extinguisher, which means that that one extinguisher can be used on most types of fires, including wood, paper, flammable liquids, and electrical fires. It is important to inspect your fire extinguishers regularly. This should be done on a monthly basis to ensure that they are properly in place, that they aren't damaged, and checking the pressure gauge to ensure that it is in the green, indicating proper pressure. If the pressure is too high or too low, it should be reported to your supervisor so that it can be serviced immediately. Additionally, a monthly inspection report should be maintained in your records as documentation that the inspection was completed. You will also have your fire extinguishers inspected annually by an authorized fire extinguisher service. They will inspect the extinguisher, recharge it as necessary, and place an annual service tag on the unit indicating that it has been serviced. When using a fire extinguisher, remember the word pass. Each letter in the word pass reminds you of steps to take when using the extinguisher. P stands for pull the pin. After you have the extinguisher in your hands, you will want to pull the pin. Normally there is a breakable seal on the handle, and after you remove that seal, the pin can be pulled. This allows the handle to be pressed down when you are ready to release the extinguishing agent. A stands for aim at the base of the fire. Aim the nozzle of the extinguisher towards the base of the flame. Normally, you want to stand about 10 feet away from the fire before you release the extinguishing agent, because if you stand too close, you could actually spread the fire even further. Now that you have pulled the pin and you're aiming at the base of the fire while standing 10 feet away, you're ready to squeeze the handle. Squeezing the handle will expel the extinguishing agent. Finally, S stands for sweep side to side. The sweeping motion allows the extinguishing agent to evenly cover the majority of the fire. There are times when an emergency will require that you evacuate the building. Know what those situations are by talking with your supervisor and your local fire authority in advance. Here are some basic procedures to follow during an evacuation. Number 1, as we discussed before, follow your chain of command. Secondly, keep in mind that resident safety is your priority. If you have residents who are non-ambulatory, you will need to assist them to evacuate out of the building. But even for residents who are able to evacuate independently, you serve an important role in guiding them, instructing them, and helping everyone to remain calm. If it can be done safely and in a timely manner, you will want to take important medications and resident records with you. But again, don't do this if it puts you in further danger. Meet at your predetermined assembly point. This will be outside the building, away from danger. Everyone should gather in that place, and then a head count should be conducted. One person within your organization should be designated as responsible for conducting the head count. You will need a roster of all residents and employees to be sure you've accounted for each person appropriately. Head counts are critical following an evacuation. We don't want anyone to be left behind. Be sure to follow direction from emergency personnel that are on site, such as firefighters, police, etc. As we discussed previously, you will want to follow up with communication to all necessary parties, including family members, responsible parties, state licensing agencies, etc. When wildfires ravaged Southern California, community personnel were prepared to contact families through email, cell phones, and other mechanisms.
I myself was evacuated with my family first, and I thought, well, I'll come to Silvergate because it's in the middle of town, it's safe, only to find out that we then were all evacuated. And at that point, although as an RN I have done drills on evacuations and emergency protocol more than I care to admit, but actually doing it was a whole different story. And our administrator just kind of took over. She ran the front desk and she gave all of us duties. We called in people who were not working to assist if they could.
Although reviewing specific medical conditions is beyond the scope of this video, you must also be prepared to respond to medical emergencies, including heart attacks, strokes, allergic reactions, psychiatric emergencies, injuries, etc. Here are some basics to keep in mind. First and foremost, when in doubt, call 911. As a non-medical facility, you are limited in the type of care and assessment you can perform on site. So call 911 to ensure that emergency medical personnel arrive as quickly as possible. Secondly is to follow your basic first aid procedures. Caregivers in your community must be trained in first aid, and you should follow the procedures and techniques you've learned. After the individual has been appropriately cared for, you will need to follow up with their family and physician for further instruction and to keep the lines of communication open. Finally, in most states, regulations will require that you file a written incident report following a medical emergency. Emergencies can be frightening, but by being prepared, and acting as a leader during an emergency, you can do your best to keep yourself, your coworkers, and your residents safe. Much success to you in responding to emergencies in your community.